Mommy, the little girl whispered. This is the nicest thing you've ever done for me. Spending time with me, just you and me. Claire's voice cracked, not with guilt, but with resolve. George says I have to choose, and I'm choosing him. Then, without warning, Claire pushed the wheelchair forward, off the edge into the deep. Goodbye, baby! No, mommy, choose me! Her scream pierced the sky, but no one came. And just like that, the one who needed love the most was abandoned by the one who gave her life. This isn't just a story, it's a painful truth wrapped in fiction, a story of beauty, betrayal, and the cold face of ambition. Watch till the end, because what happens next will shock you. The full story.
That morning, Lillian stirred in her small wooden bed. Her legs, curled beneath a faded blanket, didn't move like other children's did. But her eyes, wide, curious, and full of innocent wonder, sparkled as always. She sat up, struggling slightly, and reached for her wheelchair beside the bed. It creaked as she shifted into it, her hands gripping the cold steel with quiet determination. From the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast mixed with loud footsteps. Her mother, Claire, stormed in, high heels clacking, lipstick fresh, blouse crisp. She looked stunning, like she was headed for a date with destiny, but her eyes were hard. "Good morning, Mommy," Lillian said softly, smiling. Claire barely glanced at her. "I told you not to roll into the living room yesterday. You embarrassed me in front of Mr. Charles." Lillian's face fell. "I only wanted to show him the drawing I made." "You don't show rich men your wheelchair," Claire snapped. "They already think I'm cursed. You think they'll marry a woman dragging around a crippled child?" The words hit Lillian like stones. She said nothing. She never did when her mother was angry. Claire paced the room, fixing her earrings, then turned suddenly. "Get dressed. I'm taking you somewhere." Lillian blinked. "Somewhere? Where?" Claire forced a smile, too wide to be real. "A special picnic. Just us two." Excitement lit up Lillian's face. "Really? A picnic?" Claire nodded. "By the river. You love water, don't you?" Lillian clapped. "Yes, I do, Mommy. Thank you." Outside, neighbors watched Claire lift the girl into the car with unusual care. They saw the basket, the blanket, the juice box tucked into the corner. "She's finally showing love," one whispered. "Maybe she's changed," another said. But inside the car, Claire's grip on the wheel was like iron, her lips tight, her eyes cold, her mind loud with a decision she had already made. "After today," she whispered to herself, "I'll be free." As the car disappeared down the quiet road toward the river, Lillian's laughter floated from the window. Soft, pure, oblivious, to the storm waiting by the water. A few minutes later, Claire parked the car at the edge of the old riverside trail. Trees stretched tall and thin like silent witnesses, their branches swaying slightly in the breeze. She stepped out first and glanced around. No joggers, no fishermen, no noise. Good. Then she walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. "Ready, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice sweet and strange. Lillian nodded eagerly. "Yes, I brought my crayons. Can I draw the water while we eat?" Claire hesitated, then forced a smile. "Of course, baby." She lifted Lillian into the wheelchair and wheeled her down the dirt path, the old rocky trail that led to the river's edge. Each bump on the path jostled Lillian's chair, but she didn't mind. She was just happy to be outside, to be with her mother. "Mommy?" she said softly. "Hmm?" Claire responded, eyes fixed ahead. "This is the nicest thing you've ever done for me." Claire's hands twitched on the wheelchair handles. She blinked fast, but she didn't speak. They reached the water. It was deeper than usual. The rainy season had swollen it overnight. The current moved gently but strong, carrying floating leaves and twigs downstream like silent whispers. Claire spread out a blanket but didn't sit. She walked behind the wheelchair, stared at the water, and trembled. "Mommy?" Lillian's voice came again, uncertain this time. "Why are you crying?" "I'm not," Claire snapped too quickly. Lillian turned around slowly in the wheelchair. "Are we playing water games today?" Her voice was still hopeful. still trusting. This water seems deep. Claire knelt beside her and wiped her cheeks. I'm sorry, Lillian, she whispered. I can't tie down my life with yours anymore. I've tried. I've really tried. But you're not what I prayed for. And George, he says I have to choose. Lillian blinked, confused. Choose what? Claire stood. Her hands trembled as she gripped the wheelchair handles. Goodbye, baby. What? Lillian started. And then Claire pushed, not fast, not in a rage, but slowly, deliberately. The front wheels tipped into the riverbank, then sank. Water lapped at Lillian's feet. She screamed, Mommy! Mommy, stop! Claire's heart pounded. Her feet wanted to run, but her hands kept pushing. The chair toppled forward. Lillian fell in. A splash. Thrashing arms. Screams. Mommy? Then silence. Claire turned and ran. She didn't look back. Not once. By the time she got back to the car, she was soaked from the waist down. Her hands shook as she turned the key in the ignition. A tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She was never meant for this world, she whispered to herself. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, fixed her hair. Then she drove off, back to her house, back to her man, back to her lie. The world beneath the river was a blur, dark, cold, and loud with rushing water. Lillian plunged deep, arms flailing, her legs useless against the current. Her mouth opened to scream, but only bubbles escaped. Her heart pounded. Her mother's last words echoed in her ears. Goodbye, baby. Lillian fought upward, coughing as her head broke the surface. The current dragged her sideways, the wheelchair long gone. She gasped for air, spinning in circles, her arms slapping against the water. Her dress clung to her skin, heavy like chains. She was drowning, but just ahead, barely visible, something thick and brown jutted from the water. A tree root, fat, wet, tangled. She kicked with all the might her useless legs could give and threw both arms around the root, gripping it like life itself. The bark tore her palms, but she held on. Coughing, crying, she screamed again, voice cracked. Help, please! But only the trees heard her. For what felt like forever, Lillian clung to the root, soaked, shivering, teeth chattering. You read about this, she whispered to herself. Don't panic. Float on your back. Use your arms. Let the water carry you. But every time she tried to let go, her body began to sink. Her legs wouldn't kick. Her arms were tired. So she gripped the tree again, sobbing. She closed her eyes and tried to remember. The Children's Health magazine from the hospital waiting room. The article about swimming. The steps. The breathing. The way to stay calm. She practiced in her head. Tilt your head back. Keep your chest up. Push water with your hands. And then she tried again, gently, slowly. One arm released the tree. She began paddling softly, her breath quick and shallow. Her legs dangled like stones, but her hands sliced the surface, weak but determined. She floated, only for seconds, then slipped back under. She coughed violently, swallowed water, and reached out blindly, her fingers scraping the tree root again. Back to safety, back to pain. The sun began to rise higher. Birds chirped, the river sparkled, and Lillian, tiny, shivering, half submerged, clung to that root as if it were her last friend in the world. She was losing strength. Her voice was hoarse, her eyes heavy, and just when her fingers began to slip, a shadow appeared. Boots stepped into the water. A voice, deep and frantic, called out, Hey, little girl, hold on! Through blurry eyes, she saw an old man wading into the river, arms outstretched, water rushing around his knees. He grabbed her just as her arms gave out. I've got you, sweetheart. She collapsed in his arms, coughing, soaked, shaking, and then everything faded to black. Thomas Bennett, the old widowed carpenter, carries her gently to the riverbank, wraps her in his coat, and stares at her broken wheelchair floating downstream. He whispers to himself, Who could throw away something this precious? A few hours later, he carried her home. The room was small but warm, filled with the scent of wood polish, peppermint oil, and something baking in the oven. A ticking clock echoed softly on the wall. Lillian slowly opened her eyes to the dim glow of a table lamp beside her bed. The blanket wrapped around her was thick. Her clothes had been changed. Her hands, still red and sore, were bandaged gently. And across the room, beside a low burning fireplace, sat the man who saved her. His name was Thomas Bennett, a quiet, soft-eyed carpenter in his 50s who had long given up the hope of having children. He turned when he heard her stir. "You're awake," he said gently, rising to his feet. Lillian flinched, her voice barely a whisper. Where's Mommy?" Thomas froze for a moment. "I don't know who your mommy is, sweetheart. I found you by the river, holding on like a warrior." Lillian blinked. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She looked away. Thomas walked to the bed and knelt beside her. He held up a spoonful of warm broth. "Try to eat something, okay? You need strength." She obeyed, but her lips trembled with each sip. "Do you remember your name?" he asked softly. She stared at the spoon, then shook her head slowly. She did. She remembered, but something inside her broke when she whispered it last. Something deep told her that name belonged to a girl who had been left behind. Thomas noticed her hesitation and nodded. "That's all right. You don't have to talk about it. Not now. Not until you're ready." He looked at her a moment, then smiled gently. "I think I'll call you Hope, because the way you held onto that tree," his voice cracked, "that wasn't just survival. That was hope fighting back." She looked up at him then, her eyes wet, but for the first time she nodded. Hope. A name not given by a mother, but by a stranger who chose to save her. Weeks passed. Thomas built a ramp outside his cottage. He fixed up an old wheelchair from his shop. He cooked, cleaned, read to her at night, and told her stories about the stars. Hope didn't speak much, sometimes not at all. But she watched everything. The birds outside the window, the way Thomas rubbed his sore knees, the soft smile he gave her every morning, as if seeing her alive was a miracle he never expected. She'd wake up at night from nightmares, cold water, her mother's voice, the final push, and Thomas would be there humming softly, holding her hand until she slept again. One rainy afternoon, Thomas found her sketching with a piece of charcoal on brown wrapping paper. A tree, with a tiny hand clinging to one thick root. He sat beside her in silence. "You remember," he whispered. Hope nodded slowly. Then wrote something in shaky letters at the bottom of the page. "She left me, but I'm still here." Thomas swallowed hard and hugged her, tight. Days later, Hope sitting by the window, sketching a new sunrise. The storm in her heart hadn't ended, but the sky was beginning to clear. She didn't know where life would lead her next, but one thing was sure, the girl who was pushed into the river didn't drown. She was alive, and her name was Hope. Years passed like pages turning in a book. The girl once known as Lillian was now fully embraced as Hope Bennett, not just by Thomas, but by everyone in the quiet town of Elmridge. Her legs remained weak, but with therapy and Thomas's constant encouragement, she learned to use crutches. Her steps were slow but steady. She still didn't speak much. Trauma held her voice like a locked box, but she had found something stronger than words. Art. A voice through her hands. By 13, Hope's hands were known across town. She painted memories without needing to explain them. Her brushes became her language, her colors, her emotions. She painted a faceless woman walking away from a crying child, a tree root growing from the center of a river, wrapped in bleeding hands, a little girl sitting at a window, watching the world move without her. Each canvas told a story, her story, but no one knew it yet. Thomas built her a small art room beside his workshop and filled it with donated supplies from kind strangers and curious admirers. "You don't have to talk," he told her once, "because the whole world will be listening to your silence." The turning point. At age 17, Hope submitted her first painting to the National Youth Arts Competition, a breathtaking piece titled The River Mother. It showed a small child in water, reaching out to a woman in heels whose back was turned. Everything in the painting was gray except the child's hand, bright yellow, symbolizing life begging not to be forgotten. The judges were stunned. So were the viewers. It went viral online within a week. Who is this girl? People asked. What pain is she painting from? Who left her in the river? She received a scholarship to an elite art institute in the city. The media wanted interviews, but Hope declined them all. Until one day a letter came, the invitation. It was from the Emily Grant Foundation, a nonprofit supporting disabled children. They were organizing a special charity gala, inviting young talents to showcase art inspired by survival and hope. Thomas smiled as he read the letter aloud. You've been invited, Hope. They want you to speak. Or you could paint something new to tell your story. Hope stared at the envelope, and for the first time she reached for a blank canvas without fear. She titled it The Push. It wasn't angry. It wasn't hateful. It was honest. A small girl in a wheelchair, being pushed into water. The pusher? Only shown from the wrist down, in a sharp red sleeve, no face, no name. But viewers felt everything. Pain, rejection, silence, survival. It was unveiled at the gala under golden lights and thunderous applause. Hope, now 18, stood beside it with crutches and a soft smile. The host handed her the microphone. Everyone leaned in, expecting silence. But Hope raised her head and spoke, her voice soft, cracked, but clear. She gave me life, then tried to take it back. But life held me tighter. That's why I'm still here. The crowd went still. Then came the tears. Then the standing ovation.
Meanwhile, far away, the city was buzzing with excitement. Banners flew high, crowds danced in the streets, and chants of support echoed through every neighborhood. The leading governorship candidate and his elegant wife had won the hearts of the people. Their message was strong, their actions consistent, and it seemed like the seat was already theirs, until a strategic meeting changed everything. Just 4 days before the election, the campaign manager leaned in with a sharp idea. We need a voice that speaks louder than promises, he said. Let the disabled speak for this campaign. Let them show the world that we stand for the forgotten. If we do that, no competitor can outrun us. The candidate exchanged a look with his wife, then slowly smiled and gave a single nod. Make it happen. Within hours, calls were made, connections were pulled, and soon, a humble girl named Hope was contacted. She had become a quiet symbol of resilience and inspiration through her gifted hands, hands that told stories more powerful than speeches. They begged her, not just to sketch a powerful image for the grand finale of the campaign, but to tell her story. Again, to stand for those who couldn't, to speak through her art, to plead on behalf of the disabled, asking the future governor to never forget them. Hope listened, heart-pounding, unsure why this particular request pierced her so deeply, but she agreed. In her quiet studio, Hope sat in her wheelchair, charcoal in hand, sketching as always. Her fingers danced across the canvas, eyes blazing with silent fire, pouring pain, truth and hope into every stroke. The campaign preparations roared around her, but Hope was in a world of her own, crafting the piece that would change everything. The final campaign rally, 24 hours to Election Day. The atmosphere was electric. The grand hall was packed wall to wall with cheering supporters, cameras flashing, drums beating, and campaign colours waving in the air. Chants of victory rang out like a national anthem. It was the final rally before the big day, and it was already a win in the eyes of the people. The governorship candidate had just arrived from a crucial meeting, his suit still crisp, his smile still calculated. His wife stood nearby, poised, elegant, flawless as always. Everything was going according to plan. Then the lights dimmed slightly. A spotlight turned toward the centre of the stage. The party's chairman voice rang out. Now, to end this campaign with the most powerful message yet, let's welcome the gifted hand behind today's art. Hope. Hope rolled herself forward in her wheelchair, her sketch pad resting across her lap like a sacred book. The crowd clapped loudly, some even standing in honour. She took the mic, calm but unsure. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of truth. I was born with a story, one that began with rejection, silence and pain. But I survived, and today I use my hands to speak, not for myself alone, but for every disabled child who was abandoned, mocked, or hidden." The crowd nodded in deep emotion. Just then, the governor stepped forward onto the stage. He took the mic gently, facing Hope with a smile. "I've heard your story," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "You are a brave young woman, and if I become governor tomorrow, I promise to be a voice for disabled. But now, I want to ask you something very important." The hall quieted. Even the sound of distant drums faded. The candidate turned to Hope, then looked directly into her eyes. "Show us the face of the woman who threw you into the river. Let's know her. Let the world know that we are here for you and that we have your love at heart." Hope froze. Her fingers trembled. She looked down at the sketch pad on her lap. She wasn't ready. She hadn't planned for this. But then she saw the faces in the crowd. The eager, hopeful children, the broken ones, the forgotten ones, waiting for justice through her. She looked up and nodded. Slowly she flipped the pad over, revealing the sketch. A stunning, almost haunting portrait of a beautiful woman, smiling, confident, regal, yet behind those eyes a secret pain. The portrait was lifelike, striking, unmistakable. Just then, the governor's wife, dressed in red gown, radiant and glowing, stepped onto the podium to join her husband, and froze. Her eyes locked on the sketch, then widened. Gasps erupted across the hall like a ripple in still water. Hope stared at her in shock. Then, without hesitation, she simply pointed, her eyes filled with quiet fire. "She is the one," Hope said. Everyone turned to look at the governor's wife. Hope continued, "She is the one who gave me life, and also tried to take it." A loud gasp rolled through the audience. The hall descended into dead silence. Not even a pin dared to fall. Cameras turned to the shocked woman on the podium, her smile frozen, her breath caught. And in that moment, the truth exploded louder than any campaign speech ever could. Gasps echoed from corner to corner as eyes darted between the sketch in Hope's hands and the woman on the podium, Claire. Hope's voice trembled, but her words were clear. "She is the one. My mother. Her name is Claire." Claire's face draining of colour as the crowd turned to her in confusion and disbelief. Cameras zoomed in. Phones rose into the air, recording. Her name had been on everyone's lips just minutes ago, praised, admired, even adored. But now the very story meant to solidify her husband's victory had turned into a haunting revelation. Claire stared at Hope, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. George, the governor-to-be, visibly shaken. He looked from Hope to his wife, then back to the sketch. He couldn't deny it. The resemblance was unmistakable. Someone from the crowd whispered, "Is it true?" Another added, "She tried to drown her own daughter?" The moment was unbearable, but Hope continued, her voice stronger now. "I was just a baby, crippled, defenseless. But he," she pointed to George, "told her to choose between me and him, and she chose him. She chose power over a child's life. Over me." George clenched his jaw, guilt rushing to his face. He stepped forward. "It's true," he said, voice steady despite the chaos rising in the room. "I told her to choose. I thought having a disabled child would ruin our political image. I am not her husband, and I thought starting all over with Claire would forget about her past. But I never knew the child would go this far." Claire turned to him, her lips parting in disbelief. "George, please. You need not to confirm this scam. This would ruin us. Everyone is watching." But it was too late. The applause from earlier had turned to murmurs, murmurs into rage. Some wept. Others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Hope sat tall. "I forgave you, Mother, but the world deserves the truth. Disabled children deserve to know they matter, that we matter. I didn't come here to destroy your campaign. I came here to give the voiceless a voice. I never knew I was coming here to meet you. I never knew you are the governor-to-be." The silence was powerful. Even the cameras paused for a breath. Claire fell to her knees, broken by the weight of her past. George covered his face with both hands. Then a chant began to rise from a section of the hall. "Hope! Hope! Hope! She hadn't meant to become the face of a movement, but now she had become the voice they never knew they needed. Then came the shouts. You monsters! She's not fit to be our First Lady. We believed in you, and you lied to us. Chaos erupted. Banners were torn, plastic chairs flew across the hall, and some supporters ripped off their campaign shirts in disgust. The once colourful venue now pulsed with betrayal and fury. People surged toward the podium, not in admiration anymore, but to confront the truth. George, standing stiff in his expensive suit, could only blink as the crowd turned on them. Claire tried to speak, to explain, but the microphone was snatched from her hand. Hope stood her ground, even as tears blurred her vision. Mr. Thomas pushed through the chaos to her side, his eyes wide with pride and fear. George finally shouted into the noise, Enough! This campaign isn't about... But someone yelled, You told her to choose between a man and her own child. And then another screamed, You made her abandon hope. That was it, the final blow. People turned their backs and walked out. The media had already captured everything. The footage flooded social platforms within minutes. Headlines like The Governor's Secret, Abandoned Daughter Exposes Candidate at Final Rally, and Hope's Truth Ends Political Dream went viral before sundown. That night, the opposition party held a quiet press conference. Their candidate, a woman with a calm smile and a strong voice, promised justice, compassion, and inclusivity. She ended her speech with these words, Tomorrow we choose not just leadership, but humanity. Election day, a new turn. The next day, the results came in fast and clear. George lost. Badly. He and Claire disappeared from the public eye, swallowed by the shame they'd hidden for years. But Hope? She woke up to cameras and love letters. Not pity, but admiration. A fighter, a survivor, an artist, a voice for the voiceless. The new governor made her first executive order. We're flying Hope and her guardian, Mr. Thomas, abroad for the best treatment available. Her story will not end in pain. It will begin again with healing. And so it happened. Hope travelled overseas, her sketches packed in her bag, her dreams packed in her heart. Doctors performed the surgery with care and precision. Months later, for the first time since she was a child, Hope stood. She walked. The world clapped. Thomas was also offered a permanent role as Special Advisor on Disability Affairs. A new house was built for him with everything he ever lacked, comfort, recognition and respect. Months later, on a balcony overseas. Hope stood on a balcony, sketchpad in hand, the city lights dancing before her. Mr. Thomas sat close by, sipping tea, smiling as he watched her draw. She turned to him and said, You believed in me when no one did. He chuckled. Because you were born to rise, girl. And now you're walking your destiny. She smiled. For once, it wasn't just her hands telling her story. It was her whole life. And this time, she was walking into her future. Meanwhile, George and Claire disappeared. With the campaign ending in disgrace, the votes slipping from their fingers, and the media dragging their names through every screen and speaker across the nation, they had no strength left to defend themselves. Shame, fear, and a warrant for their arrest over attempted child murder and abuse. They fled, not to another city, not to a friend's home, but deep into Claire's maternal village, a forgotten corner of the country, a place untouched by time, no electricity, no internet, no good roads, no contact with the outside world, no knowledge that George was once a governorship candidate, no idea that an election had even taken place. The villagers saw them as nothing more than a tired, struggling couple seeking peace. And that's exactly how they lived, waking with the chickens, sleeping by the lantern, and carrying the burden of their past in silence. Far away, the world moved on. Hope walked again. Mr. Thomas thrived. A new government rose with compassion at its core. But in that lonely village, George and Claire were nothing more than ghosts of their former selves, living in hiding, far from the shame they had sown. 6 years later, The crowd rose to their feet as the name echoed through the grand auditorium. Valedictorian of the year, Miss Hope Thomas! The applause thundered. Hope stepped onto the stage, grace in every step, not with a limp, not with crutches, but tall, poised, and radiant. The once crippled child now walked with strength and confidence, her healed legs carrying the weight of every victory, every tear, every night she once begged the heavens for a miracle. She wore a smile that outshined the gold medal around her neck. Draped in her graduation robe, she held her first-class degree in international human rights law, fully sponsored on a scholarship from the same female governor who had swept the election 6 years ago and turned tragedy into transformation. Beside her on stage stood Mr. Thomas, not in worn-out clothes, not with trembling hands, but in a custom-made suit, polished shoes, and a dignified look that spoke volumes. He was no longer just a hawker or a struggling guardian. He was Thomas Okoye, senior political advisor to the state cabinet and mentor to rising youths. And he had one title he carried with the greatest pride: Hope's father. As the award ceremony came to an end, cameras flashed while Hope received a prestigious honor, the Golden Star of Resilience and Excellence. And then came the biggest surprise. The governor herself, standing at the podium, announced, "Miss Hope Thomas, your story has inspired not just a state, but an entire nation. On behalf of the People's Government, we are offering you an international role as Youth Ambassador for Child Rights and Reform with full relocation and benefits. The world needs your voice." Hope's lips trembled. The girl who was once told her life had no worth was now being given a stage to change the world. She turned to Mr. Thomas, the man who never gave up on her, and whispered through happy tears, "We made it, Papa." He smiled, eyes glistening. "No, you made it, my Hope." And in the crowd, the world stood still as one child's survival became the nation's pride. Meanwhile, back in the village, the once golden couple whose photos once graced campaign posters and TV screens now moved like shadows in the village, faded, forgotten, and full of regret. George and Claire, once hailed as the future governor and his elegant first lady, now just two miserable villagers, bound by resentment, not love. Their house, once Claire's mud house, now looking unkempt, its walls cracking, roof leaking and paint washed away. There was no security, no drivers, no staff, just silence, poverty, and the sounds of constant arguments. Every morning, Claire stepped out of the mud house wearing tattered wrappers. Her once polished nails were now chipped and brown from charcoal and cooking pots. Her hands were rough, her face aged by the sun and the weight of shame. She swept the compound with a broken broom, muttering curses under her breath. Meanwhile, George, the governor-to-be, would be found under a mango tree by 8 a.m, playing IO and local card games with old men who mocked him behind his back. "Na him dem say, come back from the city that ye see him now. Common slippers Seffi no get." He would laugh along, pretending not to care. But the truth, every word burned. Inside the house, the air was always tense. They no longer spoke with tenderness, only with venom. "You ruined everything with your greed," Claire would snap. "Me? You're the one who chose politics over your own daughter. Look at us now, disgraced, rejected, cursed. Don't you dare talk to me like that, George. Or what, Claire? You'll run back to the city that threw you away? If you step your feet in that city, you would be taken to jail and sentenced to jail forever." Plates broke, words pierced. Some nights, Claire would cry into her wrapper, rocking back and forth, whispering her daughter's name, Lillian No Hope, like a lost prayer. But it was too late. Hope was gone, and so was everything that once made life beautiful. Even food became a struggle. They now ate from the same markets they once threw money around in. Claire, once disgusted by villagers, now begged them for firewood. George, once surrounded by political aides, now borrowed cigarettes from young boys and spent his afternoons drunk on cheap gin. They had forgotten who they once were, because life had not just humbled them, it had broken them. And in that small forgotten village, two people who once dreamed of ruling the state now lived like shadows of their former selves, hated by all, remembered by none. Hello, besties. And so the mighty fell. From campaign stages to village compost, from designer suits and silk gowns to torn wrappers and borrowed sandals, George and Claire lost everything. Their fame, their fortune, and most of all, their daughter. They chased power and applause, but ended up with shame and silence. Let this be a reminder: when pride comes before people, when ambition buries compassion, when you forget those who matter most, life has a way of humbling you in the harshest of ways. They once had the world at their feet. Now they can't even afford dignity. My advice to you: don't just build a name, build a heart. Because when the applause fades, it's only love that remains. See you in the next story, and don't forget to like, share, and comment in your language. What lesson did you learn from this tale? Love you always, besties. Bye!